Hey folks, this is Guillermo Garcia from Santa Rosa Junior College. I'm an academic counselor, and if for some reason you need to reach me, feel free to shoot me an email at ggarcia3 at santarosa.edu. A little bit about myself. I was born in El Salvador. I came here at the age of 5. I was raised in Los Angeles. I didn't really think I was going to attend a 4-year university at all. But just thankfully, I was able to meet a really cool academic counselor that guided me, gave me the opportunity to be able to work on my campus. And then through that process, and with a lot of ganas and effort and time, I was able to transfer to the university of my choice. So when I was in high school, we had a lot of counselors, a lot of professionals come in, and they would talk about the more education that you receive, the more money you could potentially make. And that is absolutely true. The more education you have, the more money you could potentially make. But that does not mean that with a little bit of education, you couldn't be as successful. So just know that there's a lot of programs at the community college with a certificate, with an associate's degree you could be as successful, but it will take potentially a little bit more strategy on your behalf. One of the reasons that I really decided to focus on my education is because of the exploitation of labor. So I remember when I was 17 years old, working in McDonald's, flipping burgers, and I realized, man, with minimum wage, I'll never be able to accomplish the goals that I want to accomplish, or it's going to take me 2 or 3 times more than somebody that has like a little bit of training. When I started working in construction sites as a base in basic construction, I realized that the folks that did make more money were the ones that did have some formal like apprenticeship or training. So although construction folks do make good money, they do have to have some form of education to be able to be journeymen and specialize. However, one of the things I did realize is in construction, it is really physical. It's backbreaking work, and at the very end of the day, your body really takes a toll, especially as you get older. And then what really did it for me was when I was working at UPS moving boxes and I had to go study. And I remember my employer specifically telling me that I couldn't leave the line until I finished moving those boxes. And that's when I realized that that person definitely did not have their best interest in me and that I needed to make a change. I needed to make a sacrifice. And at that point, I had my own apartment. I was only like 19 years old. I really didn't have much support. I was about to lose everything I had if I lost that job. But I knew that I had to leave that job and focus on my education in order to reap the benefits in the long run. And I'm really thankful I did because through that process, I met a really cool counselor. Um, and then he and the college ended up taking a trip up to Northern California, and we ended up visiting UC Santa Cruz. And that was the first time I ever seen an ocean view with redwood trees, and you're just walking through the redwood trees to go to campus, and especially living in Los Angeles where there's limited access to nature of this beauty. I knew I had to get up here some way or another. And when I asked my counselor, I remember he specifically told me that it's going to take me 4 years before I even transfer. The reason being because I'm starting way at the bottom. And he told me, he said, look, you could absolutely do this, but it's going to take strategy on your behalf, a lot of ganas, and a lot of time. And if you're willing to commit to it, then you could accomplish this goal. And I'm thankful I did, So, yes, it took me 4 years before I even transferred, when it traditionally takes people about 2 to 3 years to transfer. And the reason being is because I started way from the bottom. Stuff that I should have been focusing in high school, I didn't do it. And then I had to suffer in community college and start from the basics. But I did. And through that process, I transferred to UC Santa Cruz. It took me 2 years at Santa Cruz, and then I decided that I wanted to have an impact in my community like my counselor and wanted to be a community college counselor. So I ended up going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, spending 2 years there, and getting a master's degree in education. So it's absolutely doable from somebody that had a 1.5 GPA in high school, barely graduated, taking 4 years just to transfer from the community college. Um, Up to a master's degree. And I truly believe it all is about time, investment, And if you're willing to invest that time, you can accomplish your goal. Um, in addition, I also think that through my college experience, it also motivated me and gave me the desire to be able to travel across the world. So I've been all through Central America, Mexico, Europe, and I truly believe that through college and building my motivation, my self confidence, gave me the confidence to be able to also travel around the world. So I really encourage you folks, if you decide to continue on your education, and even if you don't, to travel. Very important because I think that's going to really open your mind and your perspectives about what you're able to accomplish. So, if you really are interested in accomplishing some form of education, whether it be a certificate at a community college or maybe even a bachelor's or master's degree, the first things you really need to ask yourself is why are you attending college? I think a lot of times people are told that you have to attend college to be successful, but that's not necessarily always the case. Matter of fact, I think when people don't believe why they are in college, they start to end up burning out. Okay, and burnout is very common where you start to invest and dedicate your beginning years in education without really fully understanding why you're in it. Um, for me, I knew it was to get a better career because if I was able to get a better career, then that basically means I'm able to help out my family and my community out. But what about yourself? Is it for a better career? Is it maybe just for to help out your community regardless of the pay? However, a lot of students also have no idea of why they're in college and they're taking this time to figure it out and explore. And that's perfectly fine. That's why community college is just really important because it does give you that opportunity to explore all your different career options before you invest specific time in a certain area. If for some reason you have no idea of what you want to pursue as a career, I would encourage you to to take a class called Counseling 6. Counseling 6 Career Exploration really kind of takes the time to really explore all your different career options, the time commitment that's going to take in order for you to accomplish that goal. And that's something that's really important for you to understand is that this is going to take time. Okay. So for some of us, if you're like myself and you're starting from the bottom, it's going to take a little bit extra longer for you to accomplish your goal versus somebody that is academically inclined and knows what they want. So, how much time are you willing to invest in your education for your career is an important question to ask. So that way you don't assume that it's going to take a certain amount of time when in reality it's going to take much longer. In regards to education in America, here's the different levels. So, right after high school, you have a certificate. Um, a certificate are classes specifically related to a career. So, for example, if you want to be a mechanic, you would only take classes that are specifically related to mechanics, to automotive. If you want to be a veterinary technician, you're going to take classes that are specifically related to working with animals. We don't have a certificate for every single career out there, and that's why some people decide to end up moving a little bit higher and going and getting an associate's degree. So, an associate's degree are classes specifically related to a career, and there are also classes called general education. When you think about general education, I want you to think about the classes that you've taken in high school: math, English, science, social science. Those are very similar classes that you would end up taking at the community college that are called general education. Okay. So, aside from general education and classes specific for your major, you also have to make sure you complete something called 60 units. For more information about that, I would encourage you to make an appointment with a counselor so that way we could talk about the specifics about what it means to to complete an associate's degree. But for today, I think the most important piece to know is the difference between certificate and associates is that the associate's degree requires general education and the certificates do not. Okay, something else that's important to know is that at Santa Rosa Junior College, you could only receive a certificate and an associate's degree at the moment. Okay, the other thing that we could help you do is transfer to a 4 year university to complete a bachelor's degree. So, a bachelor's degree, you can't complete it at a community college right now. Um, So we could help you transfer to a 4 year university and complete a bachelor's degree at Sonoma State, at Chico, Davis, anywhere you want. Okay. And then at that point, once you get your bachelor's degree, that's when a lot of folks usually decide that maybe they want to be like social workers, teachers, counselors, and they decide to go get that master's degree. So there are certain careers out there that do require master's degrees. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. If you end up, or if you are interested in becoming a lawyer, then after you get your bachelor's degree, then you go ahead and go to law school. Um, and then some people, if they want to be like medical doctors, to go ahead and get their doctorate, or if they want to be a PhD, and then maybe teach at a university, they end up getting their doctorate as well. And that varies, you know. So the reason I can't tell you specifically how much time you're going to invest in your education is because it really depends on a lot of different factors. It depends on number one, if you're a full-time student or a part-time student. Number two, how many classes you successfully pass. And then number three, how many applications your program is going to require. So, for example, nursing is a very popular program. At Santa Rosa Junior College, you apply to SRJC, but then you also have to apply to the nursing program once you finish the prerequisites. So you may be accepted, you may not. So it's really hard for me to be able to tell you how many years it's going to take for you to accomplish your goal. However, if you come into an academic counseling session and we sit down and we plan all the classes, that's where we're going to be able to see roughly how long it's going to be able to take for you to complete your educational career goal. Something else to consider is also, what are your thoughts about school? If you had a negative experience in high school, how is that going to impact you in college, right? That's something to really think about, because then we have to think about the professors that you're going to take. What strategies that we're going to use for you in order for you to be successful in college. Some of the challenges that I faced were study space. You know, living in a full house with six, seven people. It was really hard for me to find a place to really study. Once I left and I was homeless for a little bit, it was even harder, because then I had to also figure out where I was going to sleep. Funding. If for some reason funding is an issue, just know that we have something called financial aid, or the DREAM Act, that will help you pay for your education. And usually, most students are eligible for something called the California Promise. So that should pay your tuition at Santa Rosa Junior College. In addition, work hours. I think this is the one that impacts students the most. Is right after high school, obviously people want to start making some money, and then they end up working more and studying less. And then they end up dropping classes. And that is really impactful in the long run, because it only prolongs your stay at the community college. Another thing that also impacts people are friends. You know, usually people want to focus in on your education, but then if you have some friends that are either partying or they're working and they're not going to school, they have a little bit more extra time, and then they might pull you away from your education. So finding a fine balance between friends and study time and work is going to be really important. Last but not least, it's also self doubt. Many times we are interested in accomplishing certain goals, but then when we think about the time commitment, all the things that are surrounding us that are negatively impacting us, we end up shutting down. So it's really important for you to also keep in mind that self doubt is real. It could impact you. And if you don't have somebody to talk to about it, it's really important to find friends or an academic counselor to really talk about it. So then that way we could go ahead and think about strategy, because this is all about strategy. Okay. So, yes, it may take some time to accomplish your goal, but with the proper strategy, you could accomplish it. You know, the reason we're talking all about this is because one of the other areas that you should really consider, that really impacts your success as a student, is your personal development. And part of that is being self aware of your needs. Okay. And being self aware of your needs, not only is it where you sleep, what you eat, how you feel about yourself, but then it's also your surroundings, right? Like the people that are around you, being aware of what is negatively impacting you. Okay, so having that self knowledge is really important because what that'll help you develop is a sense of self identity. So there's cultural identity, but then there's also self identity within your own social group. Um, I think what's also really important to develop and maintain is your talents. So if you sing, if you play guitar, if you make beats, continue doing that because believe it or not, there's campus clubs and organizations, not only at community college but at universities, that other like-minded people like yourself want to be a part of. So if you like to sing, if you like to play the guitar, join a club. You'll find other people that are also doing the same, and that's your network. So aside from being strong academically, you also want to develop your talents because that could also lead towards career potentials. Something else to also keep in mind is your capital. Okay, so your social capital, your cultural capital, your emotional capital, all these things are things that will help you in the long run. So knowing who your allies are, how to walk in this world, the different places that you have to navigate, all that leads to a self of personal development. And the reason that's important is because once you start to know who you are as a person, then you can start to understand what your learning style is. See, I needed to understand who I was as a person and the value of education in this society so I don't get exploited before I could even understand how I'm supposed to study, right? So there's different type of students out there in the world. There's some students that are visual learners that they need to look at pictures, images in order to learn the material. There's other folks that are auditory learners that they could just listen to something like a book on tape and gain the material because they could go ahead and rewind it as much as possible. Um, Other folks are kinesthetic learners. They have to move around, act it out, play it out in order for them to be able to retain the material. Um, there's some students that are much more social learners that need to be around other people so they could feed off of each other's energy. There's other students that actually doesn't really work for them. They're much more solitary. They just want to be on their own, and they just want to focus on the material. And also understand that there's not just one type of learning style. Many times it's a combination of these. So it could be a combination of a auditory, solitary learner or a social kinesthetic learner, where you combine different learning styles to be able to retain the material. But what I can say though is aside from the material that they give you in class, it's to your advantage to find supplemental material in a method that you learn best. So, for example, for me, it was recording my lectures. I'm an auditory learner because I need to record the lectures so then that way I could take them home with me and rewind them, fast forward them, and really take the time to really learn the material. In addition to that, I'm more of a solitary learner. You know, I really kind of just want to focus in on the material, read my notes, review the lessons before I go out and socialize with other people in my class and do study groups. So just know that learning styles is really a combination of of all of these, but there's one that might stand out a little bit more than the other for you. Um, if you really wanted to learn more about your learning style, that's where I would recommend you consider taking a Counseling 10 class, first year experience, or a Counseling 53 class, like a study strategies techniques, before you start investing too much in your education. Because all of this is like a house. You don't build a house on a weak foundation, and you don't build your education on a weak foundation either. Because the reality is that college is really different than high school. Here, you're much more independent. If you don't turn in your assignments, your professor's not going to be nagging you or calling your mom or your dad or your guardians. Um, here Your professor is going to lecture. They're going to have office hours. And if you don't go to their office hours, you're not going to have that interaction that you really should have with your professor. Um, Many times, professors take attendance just to take attendance, so that way they see how many times you've been absent, so then that way they could see whether they're going to drop you from the class or not. But it's not like they're going to be calling again your family members to let them know that you're not attending, right? I mean, you paid for the class, so that's really up to you whether you decide to show up or not. um Sometimes some professors will give you optional assignments, and that's just to give you more meat in regards to what they're looking for that'll ultimately impact your midterms and your finals. Um, so as you can see, there's a lot more flexibility. It's not really about getting a grade for your parents because or your family members because you're going to be in trouble, but it's really more about attending class, interacting with your professors to learn the material to get the best grade possible. So it really doesn't affect your GPA. So you have more options in the future. And that's something you need to keep in mind. So if you're not ready to attend college or to be a full time student, I don't recommend it. I would more recommend that you maybe be a part time student, go work a little bit, see what it's kind of like, and always keep in mind, right, that they're exploiting your labor, paying you minimum wage while somebody else is just kicking back, getting a ton of money for your labor. So that's something to think about. And once you think about it in that sense, I think that'll really motivate you to, at the very least, consider getting some type of training, whether it's a certificate or an associate, or even transferring. So, in order to accomplish these goals, though, you also have to evaluate what you're doing. And part of this comes with smart goals. What a smart goal is something that's specific, that you know that you could accomplish, that you know that you could measure, that you could set a limit on. Today I'm going to start this, and by this end date, I want to see my progress. Okay? Something small enough that you could measure, that you know that you could achieve, that, yeah, okay, maybe you'll fail the first time, but if you give it a second time, you know you're going to be able to make it happen. Something that's not so far off reach that you're not going to fail multiple times and it's just going to burn you out and you're just going to give up. Um, in addition to that, it's got to be relevant to your life, right? Because if it's not relevant to your life, then you're not really going to feel it. And then you're not really going to really absorb it and take it into your life. And that's what really you need to do as a college student is you need to feel why you're in it, in order for you to maintain the ganas that you need in those long nights of midterms and final study times. Um, and then last but not least, if you can set a time would be great. If for some reason you miss that time frame, I think it's not the end of the world. But just have a time frame that you would like to accomplish this goal. Okay, so for example, for me, when I was in college, when I heard 4 years, I almost gave up. I really did. But what I had to do is I had to start with small wins, and those small wins were okay. Let me see if I could be a full time student, and if I could successfully pass these classes, then that's how I know I could measure it, and then I've achieved something, right? So if I take these classes and I successfully passed all of them, that's how I know I'm able to measure that goal and I've achieved it. And why it's relevant to my life is because I don't want to be working part time and making a minimum wage for forever. So I know it's relevant. And it's time based because at the end of the semester, class is over. If I didn't meet this goal, I just didn't meet it. The first semester, it didn't go so well, right? Then I had to go do a self evaluation. Okay, what's happening? All right, I have some friends that are holding me back. I'm working too much. I got to get rid of this job. Let me give it another try the second semester. The second semester, I specifically signed up for 12 units. I knew that at the end of the semester, I wanted to successfully pass them, and I was going to do anything I needed to. And thankfully, I was able to do so, right? So you could do the same thing within your life is find something small enough that you know by a specific end date you could figure out whether you accomplished it or not, and make it small enough where it's achievable. Okay? And then always reconsider, okay, why is this important in my life? How is it going to impact my life? And if for some reason you can't find that answer, that's why it's worth, again, meeting with an academic counselor to figure out, well, how relevant is it, and whether it's something worth fighting for or something worth just putting in the back burner and figuring out there's something more relevant in your life that we should be setting smart goals towards. So, why this is important is because once you start to develop some goals, you start to see that college is really important for you, then the next step is really setting that time that's necessary. And this is a really challenging piece, I think, for a lot of folks, especially when it comes to education. Because in high school, a lot of times is you're forced to go to school, right? Unless you really enjoy your academics or your experience, many times you're kind of forced through it. And by the senior year, you have senioritis, you're kind of over it and you just kind of want to do your own thing. But just know that in college, it does take a lot of time management and time commitment in order to juggle all the different things that you have in your life. Part of it being your classes, your homework and assignments outside of class, home schoolwork. I'm sorry, uh, um, work in general, family commitments, friends, relationships. I mean, it's a lot, right? So being able to learn and prioritize what's important is the key, right? Many times I think what gets a lot of folks is either the video games or the hanging out with friends and partying or just kicking back. But just know that all that, there'll be plenty of parties, there'll be plenty of video games, but those assignments need to get done, especially if you're a college student, because the professor is not going to give you too many other opportunities, and it'll ultimately impact your ability to maintain your financial aid and successfully accomplish your goals. So the next piece you also want to think about is, again, setting a few deadlines, right? So if you're a procrastinator, I strongly encourage you to get a calendar or figure out your best way to set certain deadlines, and by a certain day you have your first draft, you keep working on it, and then you set another date for a second draft, so then that way you have a few drafts before you turn the assignment into your professor. Or if you know that you're extremely busy and you need to study, that's where you need to set certain deadlines to make sure that you have studied a certain amount of time before that final comes, or that midterm, or whatever exam it is. Because many times, as we all know, cramming doesn't help. Although we may think it does, it really doesn't in the long run. It may help a little bit for some folks that know how to work under pressure, but for many of us, it really doesn't help us at all. So in order to prioritize, set certain deadlines, there's no other way around it, folks. I'm completely sorry. But we have to get rid of some of these distractions. Okay. And some of it may be like video games or relationships, partners, because sometimes that video game we play for an hour or two and we keep reaching certain levels, or you go out on missions and other folks are on those missions too, and you just keep going and going, and 2 3 4 5 hours later, you know the whole day has passed. I know because I've seen my roommates do it before. So yeah, it doesn't really help out. So I think learning how to manage some of those distractions is the key. Maybe setting an hour or two to play video games, and you go and do another maybe 45 minutes of assignment, and you come back at it maybe for another hour of video games and another 45 minutes to an hour of assignment. Going back and forth, figuring out kind of a strategy that works best for you, I think would be the key. Um, Additionally, something that I think is important is learning how to use our technology. So we have all this great gadgets and computers and iPhones and pads and everything, but many times we don't use the alarms, we don't use the calendary systems. And I would really recommend you do, because as a college student, you have just so much going on, so many assignments, that it gets really confusing. So I think if you spend 1 hour and just put this information in your phone, and it'll give you reminders, it'll really help you manage your time more effectively. And additionally, it is asking for help when needed. I think a lot of times students don't ask for help because they feel a little nervous and don't know how to ask it. But just know that there's a lot of folks out there at the college that are there just for that, just to be able to support you. I think another thing that's a key is creating a calendar not only on your computer, but also printing your weekly calendar. This is a rough example of a student's calendar, weekly calendar. And as you can see, many times they don't even wake up until 11. And yeah, I've been there before. So don't feel ashamed if you're that type of person that doesn't wake up to 11. Matter of fact, this is important because it lets us know that maybe early in the morning, you're not the best person to take a class or to study or to do anything. So go and sleep it off. And then maybe you're the type of person that's a midday type of person like this student. So as you can see, this type of student, they only want to take a few classes, but they want to study primarily between the middle of the day. So that way they have more time to sleep, more time for family. And they say church, but it might be more time to hang out with friends. Who knows, right? Last but not least, is one of the things that you should also consider is learning how to approach your professors. If you have an intimidating professor like this one, it must be nerve wracking to be able to ask for help. But just know that professors have office hours for a reason. They're there to help, they're there to support. Yes, some professors may be a little bit more intimidating than others, or it might be a little bit more challenging to interact with them. But just know that this comes with practice. So, what I would recommend before you go to office hours is make sure you read the material, interact with the lecture notes, speak with students that are also in the same class, come up with some key questions that you're just unsure about in regards to the material, and then speak with the professor. Because they're very busy people and they teach a bunch of classes, they got a bunch of stuff going on. So they want students to come in with some concise questions if you can. There are some other professors though that are very neutral, very chill, and are willing for you to come in and just ask questions. So fill them out, ask them a couple questions and fill out the type of professor that they are, and then take advantage of those office hours. Um, and additionally, build a support group. I can't stress how important it is for students to build a support group in class. Get some study buddies, just some folks that you could just feed off of whenever you need them, even if you don't do study buddy groups. But it's just important to have some folks in class in case one day you have to miss or you have some lecture concerns. Um, on campus, build your support group on campus. Programs like the EOPS office, where they have counselors, they have they have workshops, they have food there. That's like a hub where you could get a bunch of things done at once. Learning communities like the Puente program, Emoja, APAS. I mean, these are all great programs and support groups that will nurture your college experience for the whole time that you're there. Really encourage it. In addition to that, student government, right? Because this is the way you're going to be able to help build leadership skills. And believe it or not, I think a lot of folks usually graduate from college, but they don't have any leadership skills, and it really limits them in regards to the position that what they like to apply for. I'm sure many of you have met students that have graduated from college and can't find a job. And I think many times that happens is because after they get the little piece of paper, they're competing with everybody else that has the same degree, but then also have experience. And that's why it's important to build a support group in your community through work experience, taking classes through SRJC that are called work experience, that'll give you credit for working or developing an internship in an area of interest so you can start to flip your resume. And I will leave you with that. So, aside from all the other stuff that we just talked about, the last key to this puzzle is the Career Hub. So, in the Career Hub is where you're going to be able to learn how to develop your resume, how to interview, how to find your jobs that are going to help you flip your resume from something like McDonald's and construction and FedEx into something more rewarding that will lead you to those careers that you're looking for. So really, I encourage you while you're at the junior college to take advantage of the career hub. So then that way, when you graduate, are well off into the career of your choice. In additionally and finally, it is have a daily mantra. So do a si se puede, give your friends a big high five or a hug, play your favorite song as loud as possible, and motivate yourself for the day because the more you do these type of things, have a good meal, talk to your family, the more you're gonna have success and continue that ganas. I think throughout this presentation, you've heard me say ganas multiple times, and that's the desire to continue on, right? So, I mean, you could be the smartest person, but if you don't have those ganas to continue on through the long haul, you just burn out, and burnout is really a real thing in college. But just know that through your familia, your network, your support group, and the ganas, you could succeed, and it's very rewarding. I encourage you to continue on your journey. So finally, feel free to take down my information ggarcia3 at santarosa.edu, or you could call the academic counseling office at Santa Rosa Junior College at 707-527-4451 and ask for Guillermo or Mr. Garcia. And I'd be more than happy to sit down with you or do something over the phone, especially now that we're doing a lot of stuff online, and we could develop a strategy. So today you tell me you want to be a doctor, tomorrow a lawyer, the next day who knows, and then the next day you finally want to settle to be a mechanic is perfectly fine, folks. The more we talk about this and develop a strategy, the better off you're going to be. So thank you very much for your time. Feel